Well, hello, and welcome back to the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we usually journey chapter by chapter through C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia.
But not today.
But today,
we're going to do something
Phil,
a little bit different.
We've got another. This is our first hiatus episode between Silver Chair and The Horse and His Boy.
That's right. Just checking in, keeping the feed warm.
Keeping the feed warm.
Use a farming term.
Yeah, that's where it comes from. You and I have not really seen much of each other recently because we haven't recorded in 2 months.
That's right. Yeah,
Isn't that weird?
It's a weird break.
We've mentioned this on before. You and I are not friends outside of this podcast.
Right.
We don't speak to each other. We business only texts. That's it.
Yeah.
Weirdly,
I just have you
friends,
in my phone as co-host.
Yeah. You've never learned my last name.
I don't know it.
That's fine.
Yeah. It's not a security thing on the show. It's just...
No, it's just that you don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know each other's last name.
When I try to type it, I can't.
But we haven't seen each other in a while, so we've got some fun stuff today. We're going to look back at the first 4 seasons of the show, talk about a couple of our favorite, maybe even some least favorite things. We've got quite a bit of listener feedback. But before we get into any of that, Phil, I've got to know, and by the time this airs, it will not be cool. I'm doing air quotes there anymore. Did you watch WandaVision?
I did.
Was that great or what?
Oh, man. I love that we're living in a time where that kind of thing can be made.
Television? Buddy, that's been around for...
It's so different
than
television.
The show should have taught you that TV has been around for a while.
It's so different than television.
How is it different than
television? To
me,
television has to be a 42-minute episode because they have to cram 18 minutes of commercials in there. And you get an hour time slot. Or 22 minutes if it's going to be a 30-minute show. This is different. Sometimes it's 26 minutes. Sometimes it's 50 minutes.
Was this the first time you've ever watched the streaming show?
No. So that's part of it, but that's been around. The difference here is it's a superhero TV show with a budget. With a really good budget.
Okay, fair enough.
And they don't have to have someone pretend to be Superman or pretend to be somebody where they only shoot him from behind because they couldn't afford someone that actually looks like Superman. They just have the cape.
Yeah.
And I also like that we're not trying to do this for 9 seasons. They're going to do WandaVision, and now we have another show about to come out. Yeah, and then they're going to do another show a few months later.
It is over, correct? Like they're not like that's it. We're not. It's the series. It's really a mini series.
It's a mini series. It's almost like an event.
I think you and I talked about this, and I need to make a statement on the show because recently, I don't remember, it was one of our episodes near the end of the Silver Chair, and my sister Emily, she came at a family gathering, and she called me out. She said that I was acting like I didn't like Marvel or in comic book and just movies in general on the show. Which I hope, and because we kept forgetting about stuff from Thor and whatnot, we talked a lot about Ragnarok. I hope that has not been the case. If anyone's listened to the show for 4 years, they know I'm a huge movie TV nerd. I also,
and it's because you love it so much that you have such a high standard for it.
No. But she was making it sound like she said I made it sound like I didn't like Marvel movies, and I is not. I mean, there are some bad ones, and when it comes to DC, I haven't seen any since Wonder Woman, and even then I hadn't seen all of them. I'm really not interested in any of that stuff, but I love the Marvel movies. They're so much fun. Like I said before, they are today's westerns. I don't think they'll be the hot movies in 20 years, but man, is it fun to be into something that everybody's enjoying for the most part.
Right. I love that it's a cultural event. We have so many people watching it. It's not just people who like comic books that are watching it. This is the most popular type of movie, I feel, right now.
I think when we think about things like WandaVision, right? And we talked about The Mandalorian on one of the Dancing Lawn episodes. I think what these things do for us is the same reason that people tune into this podcast, which is that we all want to talk about things that we love together, right? And it used to be, you and I are young guys. We both turned 30 this year, though. And so we both can remember a time when everybody was watching mostly the same TV shows. And I do think that what's really fun about WandaVision is that it's kind of brought some of that kind of water cooler talk back that we've kind of lost as everything has become. I mean, there's like, we got Paramount Plus now. We've got Apple TV Plus. I mean, there's so many streaming services out there. We're all watching different things at different times, and it doesn't seem to be, and even stuff that's on, people watch it all different times. Oh, I'll catch it on Hulu later, blah, blah, blah.
And there's more, quote, quality content coming out than you could realistically watch. Now,
exactly.
Everybody has a friend who has seen all the things, but...
And I think...
It's not that possible.
I think why something like WandaVision is so successful, although it is well made. We're not going to get into any spoilers. I thought it got weaker as it went along, and I not loved the last episode. But... I thought it started really strong, and I enjoyed tuning in every Friday night. And I think it's so enjoyable, though, because you know what I did on Monday? I went in and my kids wanted to talk. My students were like, wait a minute, we got to talk about this, right? Yeah. I would text you. Oh, I forget. No, we don't text each other. I would think about texting you, and then I realized we don't hang out.
You don't even have my number.
Yeah, I couldn't because I don't have your number. But you talk to friends about it, and I think it kind of gives this communal viewing experience in the same way that we get to come together here on this podcast every 2 weeks when we're on season, and we talk about the same chapter. And whether you read it leading up to that episode or you just remember from just reading as a kid or like back in the past, we're all kind of being able to share in that experience, even if it isn't the same time. There's going to be people that listen to our podcast years later, and there's people who tune in the day it comes out. And I think that's what made WandaVision so enjoyable. I wasn't planning on watching any of the other ones. I did think WandaVision looked the most interesting, and I think Elizabeth Olsen is just maybe one of the best actresses in the MCU. I mean, she is, outside of that, she's done so much good work. And so I wanted to tune in, and I wanted to see it. But now I'm like, I kind of might watch the other ones.
Right.
I'm not really, nothing about the, whichever one's next. The one with... what's next? Falcon.
Yeah, Stan and Falcon or something.
Yeah, I mean, I cool. I'm not against it. I'm not super excited for it. But if a couple weeks in it gets some good reviews, I might be like, you know what? I'll make time for this. Yeah. If people are excited about it. Loki's got Owen Wilson, so I love Owen Wilson. I'll tune in for
that. That's so fun.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be his big break.
So none of the stuff with Wes Anderson or any of those other terrible, not Wes Anderson's not terrible, but then all the other comedies he did, none of that was his big break. It'll be
this is it
here in a Disney Plus streaming show.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I also enjoy how Disney Plus is paying attention to what's working, and they're pushing that more. Yeah. And so an example is The Mandalorian. They released it one episode every Friday. Yeah. With a few exceptions for special events. But they were going to release WandaVision all at once, let people binge it. But I think people like the staggered, it's coming out one episode at a time. Because we caught up, and then we were...
Yeah, because you and
Sarah
behind,
Jane were both talking to you about what your thoughts were, what you liked. Anna was chiming in too. It was so fun.
Yeah, it really does just go to show how enjoyable it is to share with other people just content. And whether it's movies, whether it's television, whether it's books like you and I do here on this show, or even music. I mean, it's one of the... don't get me wrong. I love how much music is available to me. But I also remember in middle school just literally burning CDs 24/7 to just give to my friends. I'd be like, I made you a mixtape. I made you a mixtape. I made you a mixtape because I want us all to listen to the same stuff. And now with Spotify, I have more music than I could ever imagine. And so it's honestly not very often that me and my friends are all listening to the same stuff unless it's very popular. I was a big fan of the Taylor Swift album last year. Both of them. They were great. I can't believe I liked them, but it was I think David and Matt over at Pine for Jack will be happy because I think they're both big
Swift fans.
Is their name parrot heads for Jimmy Buffett? Do they have names? They're gonna come for us now. The Taylor Swift fans are going to let us know.
They're gonna send you a tweet and you're not gonna get it. I do think there's one exception to that, and that is if I want you to hear a song, I can send you a link and you can open it because it seems like everyone in our friend group has Spotify, and they have access to that.
Apple Music, get out of here! No thanks.
I know that some people use that.
I have a good friend who's consistently tries to He's an Apple Music apologist, and is like, you've got to leave Spotify. I'm like, sorry, they got me 10 years ago, and I'm too deep in.
Yeah.
The same reason why I'll probably have an iPhone to the day I die, because it's already happened. I have my Mac, I have my iPhone, and I can't stand that one person in a group message that makes the little thing green, and then every time someone likes, someone's thinking it's like so and so like this, so and so like this. I'm like, can you guys please stop liking pictures of my son? Actually, because
probably the hardest thing you have to deal with.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's the most difficult thing, but. But yeah, so I mean, I don't want to get too off the rails. Although this is, hey, it's a hiatus episode. I do think there's more that we could talk about, maybe just over the course of the next hiatus. Maybe in Dancing Along, we'll have more of this conversation about why we do find it so enjoyable to share good stories with other people. I love to talk about that kind of stuff with my students.
It's probably very deep in our brains. Yeah, from like a historical perspective, I think people really enjoy that shared experience. I remember my dad telling stories about watching Mork and Mindy, which was one of the first things Robin Williams was in. And they would watch it and they would try so hard to remember everything that happened and every line and every joke, because then the next day they would repeat it to each other. They would quote almost the entire episode.
You know, it was a spinoff of Happy Days, by the way, right?
It was?
Yes, it was a spinoff of, and I don't remember how it all worked out because it's a show about an alien. But it is there's like there's a couple other shows that are, I think it's before the shark jump.
Okay.
Right? It's before Fonzie does that. He jumps the shark. But yeah, it was some kind of spinoff they did, and that was, it's a big break. I mean, the base level of it is just the very simple Christian truth, is that we worship a God that is in community with himself. That's the Trinity. That is, just really basic. That's like first grade level, Trinitarian theology. There's God that's 3 and 1, and because God is 3 and 1, we also like to be in community with others. That's why community is important. And so we loved, when I read a good story, I want to share it with people.
Right.
And what we love doing with the podcast, and we're going to do it in just a little bit, is we like hearing other people's experience. It shows the diversity in thoughts. I mean, one of my favorite things was hearing other people's thoughts about WandaVision recently. Oh, what did you think of this? And what do you think's happening here? Why is so-and-so doing this? Or why did we see this? I think why people love hearing you approach these books as someone who hasn't read before is because there's this infinite possibility. There are infinite possibilities that lie ahead as you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. This will be me now for Horse and His Boys. I've read chapter 1, but I don't know what happens after that for the most part. And it's what allows us, as we kind of experience this, what do you think is going to happen next? And TV, really more than anything else, may potentially, as something that we watch serialized, and so we're all on the same episode if we're watching it, and on time or something, and we can go, what's going to happen next? This is why I loved Lost so much in high school, is because I watched it while it was on TV, and all my friends got together every day at lunch after an episode would be like, guys, what is happening?
Right.
And so much, and these are friends who I'm still friends with. Trent, who was on the show, remember back in season 1, he came on and talked about BBC List. Trent was one of those friends of mine, and we've been friends for 15 years now, and some of that friendship was really solidified through talking about television together.
Right.
But we did a ton of books. Trent and I love to talk about books too. But it really was Lost was a really big thing for both of us, and Flight of the Conchords and The Office. Those were we really loved those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was The Office is just a standout show in general, but one of the biggest benefits was getting to talk to people about it,
that's
later on in the week.
I think I've said this before. That's how I learned first about podcasts, is I had my little iPod mini in 8th grade, and Lost was in season 2 when I was in 8th grade. This is 2004, 2005. And I was I wanted to talk to more people about it, but I didn't know a ton of people. And this was you could maybe go find some message boards and stuff, but message boards is not logging on to Reddit, right? It's not like going on to Twitter or something.
It's a lot more scrolling.
It's a lot more scrolling. It's a lot slower. It's not a bad thing. It can be a really great place, but it's not the same thing. And I remember just wanting to talk more about it. And so I somehow, by searching on the internet, I found these radio shows that I could put on my iPod and listen to, in the car when my parents were driving me to school or something. And that was kind of my first experience, was finding Lost podcasts that got me into podcasting in general.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a similar thing where I would get into something, and part of it was I didn't have enough money to buy songs on iTunes, and I didn't have a credit card,
cents,
so I
yeah,
couldn't.
yeah.
It wasn't that easy. But the podcasts were free, so you can
you just go
load this up. I got into all kinds of stuff. That led me into like drawing comics, and it got me like really into the format of podcasts, and something we connected on later on.
It's funny, we had to like plug in to our computer to download a podcast.
Yeah, every morning I would wake up and I would run over to the computer before I took a shower, and I'd plug it in, make sure that you had to make sure it downloaded to the computer, and then you had to make sure it synced, and then you had to check that it was actually there and going to play, and then you could take it with you to school.
These are the kind of things that, as I talk to my students who are, they're Gen Z, they're 12, 13 years old, and I'll share some of these things with them. It's again, you and I not old dudes, but they'll be like, how did you live like that?
Right.
Like how did you? And I'll be like, yeah, we had I put my cassette player in my little Walkman. I put my headphones on, and then I was really excited one day when I finally got an iPod. Yeah. And it's so funny, is they're just like baffled by the lack of the similar technology, but yeah. But we should move on and talk a little bit about have a little mini retrospective here on these first 4 seasons. We're halfway through.
Right. Well, we're over halfway through.
Yeah, about as halfway through as we can be.
We're 4 books in, and we're going to talk about first favorite book so far.
Yeah, we've made it through Wardrobe and Caspian and Dawn Treader and now The Silver Chair. And we thought it'd be a good time for us to talk about, what we've enjoyed the most. I'd love to hear, Phil, what has been, okay, and you've now read all 4 of these books as an adult. Which book was your favorite?
So, you know how Douglas Gresham says whichever one he read last?
Sure.
I think I might be falling into that.
Yeah.
Because I definitely think that The Silver Chair has been my favorite so far.
Your favorite book?
Yeah. Just the sheer amount of stuff that felt relevant to my life, and just the things that I feel like God's working on my heart with. Mm-hmm. Oh man, it's just chock full of it. And I also it's so different, and maybe because I had seen the movies of the first 2 and maybe even the first 3 if you count the BBC miniseries, I felt like those stories were much more familiar, but this was so different.
I have similar feelings. I loved covering The Silver Chair, and it's really hard for me to divorce creating this podcast and the actual text itself now, and I don't mean that to sound self-important in the slightest bit, but we started, it's March now, we started last May and June. We started The Silver Chair. We started recording, we started prepping, and we spent so much time in this book. I mean, I was reading at least 1 chapter every week, even if it was just a reread. I was listening to the audiobook. We'd be texting each other about it. Are we keeping that joke going, or can we let that facade fall?
we actually do text each other. And I think this one we had quite a few moments where I would text you several days ahead of time, really looking forward to talking about this one because this is an amazing chapter.
Yeah.
That happened before, but not as much for one book.
It's, and I just the guests we had on brought so much just knowledge and wisdom to us. And so it's hard for me to kind of separate that from the actual book itself because that experience is so wrapped up in it at this point, because I absolutely had the most fun on The Silver Chair. I mean, every season has been better. Obviously, you and I sitting here in a room with microphones is way better than when we were both in closets in different homes over Zoom or Google.
Right. Using a borrowed snowball mic from work.
And I would sit on my laundry hamper.
I didn't know that. We've really come a long way.
I would speak into the into my shirts in my closet. You did, we both did the same thing. Yeah. So obviously that was not as much fun as hanging out.
What's funny is we were so concerned about the sound quality.
Yeah,
and we were using terrible mics and talking into the closet. I don't
say terrible. There's a lot of people that use those mics. They're not as good as what our patrons have allowed us to get now, but
right. they were also a little bit old, I think.
Yeah, mine was like 10 years old.
Yeah, I think if you use a more recent snowball,
I'm sure they're better.
Much different. This was like literally dusty in the back of the supply closet, and I asked my boss, like, "Can I take this home?
Hey, is this thing, can I have it?" He's like, "Yeah, we're gonna throw it."
Because we weren't sure this was gonna. We weren't sure how long this was.
Didn't know anybody was gonna show up. Yeah.
And those first 3 were so awkward. That
I told you, I don't know. We've mentioned this many times before. You know, we've recorded the first 3 episodes. It was called Into the Wardrobe, right? And they're bad. They're really, really bad. Yeah. I have the first one still. I have it saved in my Google Drive. I said maybe we'll like make it a perk on. Hey, if we get to like 100 patrons on Patreon, we'll let you guys hear it. It's rough.
And again, I say we reverse that. We say if we get to 100, we won't release this.
We won't release it.
You don't have to listen to
it. If we don't get to 100 patrons, The Horse and His Boy will start each episode with that 30-minute episode. Then you have to skip. No, I'm just kidding. So, but the second and third, I can't find them anywhere. Yeah. And part of me wonders if I actually just deleted them because they were so bad and I'd forgotten that I deleted them, because I don't know why I kept this other one. Maybe I was like, it's like there's no way. We never knew the podcast would be this successful. And so there's no way that I thought, hey, I'll keep this because it'll be this fun thing down the road. That's not what we thought at all. But man, it was rough. We re-recorded all those and it's improved. So we have had more fun each season doing this. And so for me, that makes the Silver Chair just very special for me. And I'm sure that it'll improve when we go through The Horse and His Boy. And I hope every season is more enjoyable for you and I and for our listeners. But I still think my favorite book is going to have to be Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Why is that?
It just... I really believe it's the strongest ending of all the books. Now, we just aired, back in January, maybe it was February. I can't remember when we actually released it, but not too long ago, we talked about chapter 16. We had Rachel come on the show, and I mentioned how much I love the Silver Chair's ending, and I do. But Voyage of the Dawn Treader, when they go from the island and Ramandu's island, and then they go to the end of the world to the Silver Sea. I love that chapter. It's so ethereal. And they get to eventually the very end of the world, and the lesson that Caspian learns, and Reepicheep's goodbye, and then this, and we're going to talk about this. I have more to talk about this Eucharistic imagery that happens with the lion or the lamb turning into the lion, and the meal being shared between Aslan and his followers
that was really good.
Absolutely beautiful. And I've read some stuff, for that class I was teaching. I read more about some of the sacramental imagery in Dawn Treader, and
the Sacramento.
Did I say Sacramento? I meant sacramental. Sorry. It's got California on my mind, I guess. Shout out to all of our listeners in Sacramento. So I think that's still my favorite book, and I think it's the strongest from start to finish. I think Silver Chair, I loved it. It's probably my second favorite. I do think that there's that little gap, and we felt it a little bit as we recorded. We mentioned it, that after the Lady of the Green Kirtle is defeated, there's like 3 chapters there where I really don't think much happens. It kind of it's this like catch-22, because the good thing is that really once she's been defeated, we know, that Aslan's going to win, right? We know that they do have to still make it back to Narnia, but the evil has been defeated. And I think when we had Father Dan on, we mentioned something along the lines of, maybe he did, I can't remember, this idea that, Puddleglum's faith, having this faith and turning and saying, we're going to believe in Aslan no matter what, that was the victory. Mm-hmm. And so I love that. But then kind of the only problem I have with it, the only critique I have, and this is totally subjective for me, is that those next few chapters, I just felt like a lot of the tension was just gone. Don't get me wrong. I loved Meet and Golg. I liked the Bism stuff. It's not bad at all. But if I have to say why Dawn Treader is better than Silver Chair, I think those chapters just brought it down a tiny bit. Again, I absolutely love this book, but I'm trying to kind of find some. And then for me, it just if we're gonna, I guess I'm ranking them for you right now. I would say Dawn Treader, Silver Chair, Wardrobe, and then Caspian.
Yeah. Do you think there's a difference between favorite and best?
Oh, like all the time.
Yeah.
But usually.
You're still ranking your favorites. You just like are picking the reasons.
Yes, and I would say that even maybe Wardrobe is the best.
Okay.
Just because of how powerfully it communicates the gospel. It's really hard to argue. Of the ones we've read, I think there might be another book that we're going to read that I might argue was actually the best. But I think Wardrobe might actually be the best. My favorite's Dawn Treader.
Cool.
What about you? You want to? There's 4. Go ahead and rank them now.
Yeah. So Silver Chair at the top. That's tough. I think Dawn Treader would probably be second, and then Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe and Caspian.
Okay.
At the end. Just having gotten some distance from Caspian, especially compared to Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe, in terms of what my favorite would be. I think that's how it would go. Which is probably contradicting something I said earlier, but it changes.
It changes all the time. Yeah. My ranking of the Star Wars movies regularly changes. It's always Star Wars first and Empire second, but then everything else is like, who knows? You know? So. All right. Well, what else? What about characters? We've met a lot of characters over 4 books. Do you have a character that has stood out as your favorite?
Yeah, it's still Reepicheep.
Reepicheep. All right.
Yeah, Reepicheep's just so fun, and his lines are so good. Just the way he's so full of energy, but also gets quietly corrected by Aslan. Just sometimes I think you think too much of your tail or your honor. I really enjoy that. I think that Puddleglum was a very close second. Just the fact that he's put his foot in the fire in the middle of that trance scene just shows so much about him. Yeah, he's really, depressing to be around, and he says all this negative stuff, but it's funny. And when it really counts, he shows up and he does the right thing at great cost to himself. Yeah. And that's hard to beat. What's yours, Mrs. Beaver?
Are we doing least favorite characters? Because I'm still I'm a Beaver hater. I don't actually hate him. But I feel like most people do like Mr. and Mrs. Beaver more than I do. No, my favorite. This is so. It's not cliche because it's true. But you got Reepicheep. I think I'd take Puddleglum. I really think I would. Yeah. I think he has it all. He is absolutely hilarious. He has long monologues that have deep theological weight to them. And he also has like gut-busting one-liners. Yeah. And he just is the total package. He has all of that. He is, he goes from being this kind of, he follows and supports the children, Eustace and Jill. He also has times where he leads Eustace and Jill. I really think the arc we see for Puddleglum from chapter 5 all the way to chapter 14, from his introduction, no, it's chapter 16, right, is the end of the Silver Chair, excuse me. So 5 to 16 is one of the most carefully crafted arcs that we see that we have seen in the Chronicles. I think the only person who I might argue has a stronger arc is Edmund across the first 3 books. But obviously, and that's a ton of character development happens for Edmund. And Edmund might be my close number 2. I don't know, maybe used or Jill. Oh man, we're not gonna get into. Okay, I have to pick one. I'm gonna go.
What's funny is this is hard for you, and you rank things all the time.
I rank things all of the time. Yeah, I have my letterbox thing. That's like the movie thing I do, and I literally have like 57 lists of just like, here's my favorite movie from every year I've been alive. It's just like silly.
And that's not counting the number of notes you have on your phone.
I have a lot of notes. They're just notes.
Constantly changing and rearranging.
I have my favorite album, my top 10 albums of the last 15 years. For each year, I have my top 10
categorized albums by year.
Yeah. I just like doing it. It's fun. So Puddleglum, though. I will say Puddleglum is my favorite. You kind of joked about it, but do you have a least favorite, a character that you were not that intrigued by?
Not that intrigued by. That's a little different. It
can be someone you dislike too. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver do get on my nerves a little bit, but I actually really like them. I just I like being silly about them. Yeah. I actually don't like the Duffel Puds. Like that's an actual thing I dislike.
Yeah, I feel like, and this is, maybe because of how little time they had, but Malgrim, it's just, I don't, there's some characters where I feel like they're gone.
I think
they're
you mean
gone so
Fenris
fast.
Ulf. Which version are you reading over there?
The American version.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but that was the American version, was the Fenris Ulf one.
Oh,
then
then
they got switched back. Yeah,
changed it back.
It was Malgrim, and then when it was published in America, Lewis changed it to Fenris Ulf, and then HarperCollins changed it back.
Gosh.
We really have grown a little bit since we were first Narnia novices.
That's right. Yeah. Now we know some deep cut stuff.
So Malgrim is probably your least favorite.
Just from like a literary perspective.
Yeah.
So like, here's a character that was introduced and then gone pretty quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, well, what's up next, Philip?
Let's talk about the most surprising thing during this podcast.
About doing this podcast. We're coming up on 3 years. So yeah, what has been something that's been really surprising about this experience so far, as we're about halfway through?
So this has been a pleasant surprise, but we have not missed a release. The podcast has come out every Wednesday on time. And I think that's difficult to do. And it's all Daniel. When you tell me when to show up, I can make sure that I show up.
That is true. You do always make it here.
And if I live here.
That's
you
fair.
make it here.
I make it here.
I used to make it there. It's just, that's not, not everybody can do that. And there are two factors at play. One, I think that we really care. And I think that we really care about podcasting as a medium, not in the like obsessive way, but just we understand because we were listeners first and we still are listeners. And we know what it's like to check in and like try to get an episode as soon as it comes out. I think we like that. And it's just important to be consistent. And we're probably both a little nervous about what happens if we miss one.
Yeah, I think we're
just how do you keep the momentum? And it hasn't been a challenge. And part of that, this is the other pleasant
you
surprise.
Don't do any of the editing, but sure. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
The other part, this was a very pleasant surprise right from the beginning. You have it planned out. You have all 7 seasons planned out. And you even have a little bit of, you have contingency plans. I saw the tab that like, what if Phil gets hit by a car? Like, what am I going to do? And you have like,
one of our guests,
Chris Evans is on that list, Mark Ruffalo, all the names that you want to bring in case I can't make it.
Yeah. Who replaces you? That's good. I'm glad those things have been fun. And I do think we have been rather meticulous in making sure that, I do care a lot about our release schedule. And we've got 3 years to, we got 3 seasons to go. And so, we're crossing our fingers that hopefully, and that we'll always be on time and stuff. But I am happy that we've been able to do that. And I hope that it's been beneficial for our listeners. I know what it's like to get up, get ready for your morning commute. Be like, I can't wait to listen to, whatever. And it's like, oh, it's not there. And, it happens. Like, I totally get it. It's no shame or on anybody who's ever struggled if you're a creator to put something out. Because I get it. Don't believe me. But it is something we're passionate about. I think for me, you picked 2 things. So I'm going to pick 2 things. I think the first thing has just been how absolutely incredible and humbling it is to hear from our listeners, like regularly.
Not just once or twice, but some people sending in multiple emails.
People who are like, we've gotten 3 or 4 emails through over the years, and that means a lot. It's cool to have met. Like you and I have friends now.
We have people that we've met in person where we introduced ourselves and they said, "Oh, you're Phil and Daniel."
Yeah, and it's
and to be fair, we were at a C.S. Lewis conference, and that doesn't happen all the time, but it still happened, and that was really fun.
and there's been other people even outside of that conference that we've been able to connect with and build friendships with. But even just our listeners, maybe someone who doesn't have any background in Lewis and is just enjoying the podcast, but wants to write into us and share with us their thoughts. It just goes to show. I mean, this is so to Lewis's credit. There's so much credit goes to Lewis here, that he has created a world and a mythology and a series that people just love to engage with, in spite of your, our tomfoolery that's happening here, every time we push the record button, people still want to come and they want to go to Narnia, right? And that's not because of us. That's because of what Lewis has done. And so I love hearing, a lot of times on the show we'll read emails. And I've always wondered if anyone will ever ask us this, and no one ever has. It's a great thing. Because a lot of times we'll just read an email that a lot of times people contribute something like, hey, what do you guys think of this? Or I have this theory, or I just wanted to share something with you. A lot of times people just email us and they'll say, here are my favorite books and here's how I first found Narnia. And we read it. It's not necessarily like we have much commentary to give on it. It's just to kind of share that voice and share someone else's experience. And I love hearing those things. Like listeners, I always want to hear, we got some today. I've picked out at least one that's just like, telling us about some of their experience with the Chronicles. And that's just great. I look forward to. I actually get those emails on my phone. The Narnia podcast at gmail.com. And I love looking down, and instead of it being like, hey, here's what's on sale at Target right now.
Or here's your bill.
Yeah, here's the energy bill or your city bill. I look down and someone's like, my thoughts on The Lady of the Green Kirtle.
Oh,
and
yeah. I'm
like, I cannot wait to open that and hear from people. So that's been super fun. As well as just, this is like 1 point A here. Because, you and I have just had so much fun doing this, especially with Anna and Sarah and bringing them in. And just like, it's been fun for our friendship to do that. So I'd want to acknowledge that too. The other thing that's been such a beautiful thing, and I hope this has been true for other people, is I just feel like reading, like, just swimming in the words of C.S. Lewis and the biblical truths, the universal truths that he communicates through his work. I think it's been so edifying to me. I think it has really been beneficial for me as a Christian. I think it's been beneficial for me as a husband and now a father. My son and I, we got the new, like the board book of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I've read them. I feel like 2 chapters ago. It's been very slow going. I was very optimistic that I could read a chapter book to a baby, and I took it very slowly, and then he started crawling, and it's just like, I don't know when it's going to happen. I got to eventually, I said, before it turns 1, I'm going to read him Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. We got like 3 chapters left. And but we read the board book though, so I spoiled.
Oh, you said board book. I was so confused what a word book was, or what you thought.
Well, books do usually have words in them, so so I read in the board book, and even like those words, some of the words C.S. Lewis's, but the story itself obviously is his. It's all his, and just was like really moved by just the beauty of the story and the way that we have a lot of board books, and we have like the Jesus Storybook Bible. We have some other good stuff, and we also just read to him. From scripture, especially and we do our prayers from the Book of Common Prayer. And, but just being able to kind of share this story of the gospel with him at such a young age through this imaginative world that Jack has created, I can't wait to continue doing that. And that's Lewis, and ultimately it's Lewis doing what he should do as a faithful man of the Lord, which is pointing back to the person where all that stems from, right? And so I think that has been, I never imagined that. And that's my own, I guess, just ignorance and the amazing things that God can do. But I never, we had zero, I don't even think we talked, we didn't even know how much we would talk about religious elements from the book at first. We're like, let's just talk about the books. They're really fun.
We honestly were picking a series that was going to have enough content and was broken up into enough pieces to do episodes.
I don't think we can stress enough that there's 5 other ways this podcast could have gone. It was not like we said, let's start a Chronicles of Narnia podcast. We said, let's start a podcast. What can we talk about? And you can hear it. If you ever go back and listen to those first episodes, we don't know anything about these books. I'm like, I've read the first one a ton with my, with fourth graders I was teaching at the time. But we're not Lewis people. That's slowly happened over the years that we've
So to your point 1A, I couldn't agree more. That's been a really pleasant surprise. Just how much good stuff is in there, and how much I think about these examples outside of whatever I'm doing. And I love that. I think someone mentioned earlier that this has become like a shorthand, like, hey, remember this experience that happened or this scene that happened? That's a great way to explain this thing.
Yeah,
that
Rachel does that with her kids. She was saying, the person's such like a puddle glom or whatever, right?
Yeah. That kind of stuff is amazing. But I also think that a big part of that is you're doing these deep dives and bringing in so many other sources too. And some of those sources I've purposely stayed away from. Some of them, they're not as accessible to me. I don't have the desire to read those, but you bring them and you say that you like explain what they're talking about in a way that I feel like I can understand. And that does get me a little more interested in whatever the point is of what the author's talking about. Yeah. That's been fun.
That's true. Yeah. All right. So moving on, one final thing before we get to some listener feedback here. We have 3 books to go. I have talked. There are contingency plans of, but we have 3 books to go. We got The Horse and His Boy, The Magician's Nephew, and The Last Battle. You know a little bit about each, but very, very little. What, Phil, are you most looking forward to over the course of the next 3 seasons as we get into these 3 final books? And 3 books which do not have any adaptations of them, are, I would say, easily the least known books in the series, just because of the lack of adaptations. And 3 books that I don't want to say too much, but really don't concern most of the characters we've interacted with so far. What are you looking forward to here?
I am so looking forward to finding out what is happening in those books. Keep in mind that these books, the 1970s editions with the very bright colors in the box set and the numbers in circles, it's been in the fancy bookcase at my house since I was a kid. And my dad read 4 of them to me. And
he said you weren't ready for the other ones. They were just too...
No, I think we were reading other stuff by that point. And I remember looking at him thinking, I wonder what happens in the last battle. And in 6th grade, I got really driven, but I didn't know what to do with that drive yet, and I lost it. But I
thought you were going to say you read it, but no, you didn't.
No, okay. I received a copy of all 7 together, so now I don't have to worry about carrying around individual ones.
Sure.
And I carried this book to school multiple times.
You never read it.
And I never read it. I just was carrying this big book around.
So would you say you're most excited for the last battle?
I think I'm actually most excited to find out what happens in all 3 of them.
All 3 of them.
And to be able to say I've read all of the Chronicles of Narnia and I know what happened in them.
Yeah. So you can go to like a elementary school and be like, "Hey, I've read all the 7 books. You've only read."
Right. It's funny because now, and part of this is age, part of this is experience, but I feel like I can read more and I understand how, like I just can read faster. I have a better comprehension. I have more life experience, so I can relate to more stuff that's happening. I can read at a higher level. And once you read at a higher level, the, kind of stuff aimed at lower ages is a little faster, just as a side effect. But I feel like I'm finally going to do this thing that it seems so impossible. Like, who reads an entire series of something? I had done that with Harry Potter and maybe a few others, but they always kept adding books, and there are other things that I wanted to read.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's so many things I'm looking forward to, but I'm really excited to change up our dynamic for The Horse and His Boy and to read this one chapter at a time. I know a little bit. I know I've read the first chapter. I've met Bree. I've met Shasta. But that's about it. I know that he's leaving Calorman and trying to go north. Actually, we shouldn't talk too much about this, but I have a little bit of understanding. I have no idea where it goes. I have an idea of how it's going to end just because it's Narnia, but it's especially this middle part of the book that I have no knowledge of for the most part. It's going to be really fun. I think it's going to be a fun dynamic. I think it's going to be fresh for us as hosts. And I then love that we get to go from Horse and His Boy straight into Magician's Nephew, which has some of my favorite images and all. That's all I'll say in the Chronicles. And then The Last Battle, which I think is probably the most controversial book in the Narniad. It's probably the most polarizing. It is a book that the last time I read it as an adult, I really liked some parts and I really disliked other parts. And I think that it's going to be the Last Jedi of, should I say that? Or people are going to tune out now? It's going to be, I think, a book that many listeners adore and love. And we're going to hear from that. And it's going to be a book that many listeners find disappointing. And they already, not that they find it, they already know, but that we're going to be able to hear these things. And I'm excited to hear how you feel about this book. Because overall, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of it overall, despite a couple of weaknesses. But I think that'll be a really fun conversation to have. Yeah. All right.
We'll look forward to that too.
It's nice to end with like what we get to look forward to as we've been looking back as well. So
right.
I hope this isn't too self-indulgent of us to sit around and just kind of discuss, because it's been a fun. It's kind of hard to believe here we are 3 years later. You know. Well, Phil, the first email that we are going to read is from Jamie. We've got an email from Jamie, and I'm going to read this one. And Phil, maybe you want to read the next one?
Fun fact, we have a label in our email called Turkish Delight.
We do. If you have ever written us an email about Turkish Delight, we have not ignored you. We have it labeled here. We've talked about in the future doing a whole Turkish Delight episode. We just haven't done it yet. So we do have it in time. I love email labels. So we do have, oh my gosh.
Do you know why labels are better than folders?
Why?
Because you can only put something in one folder, but you can have multiple labels.
Yeah, exactly.
So we could have like a Turkish Delight label, but also a hilarious anecdote label.
Well, our just in case anyone wants to know how things work in the Gmail folder here, I've got the listener feedback one, then the ones we read on the show, because we can't read all of them. We wish we could, but we get too many these days. And then we have the Turkish Delight one. So there are some that are both Turkish Delight and listener feedback. I've got 16 here. So they're just people asking us about Turkish Delight. We have not, the 16 of y'all, we have not ignored you. We are just waiting. We are trying to work on something very special in the future. It just might not happen in the immediate future. So I do want to say that, since Phil's put me on blast here saying that we haven't answered those emails. All right, well, let's get to this to Jamie's email here. We've got an email from Jamie, and she writes, "Hey, Daniel and Phil. My name is Jamie. I'm a high schooler from Colorado. I thought I would write in to share my thoughts, especially since I haven't noticed anyone my age writing in." Well, first off, before I even keep going, thanks, Jamie, for writing in. It's great to have
appreciate it.
All kinds of voices. We've heard from people, around our age. We've heard from people who are much older than us. It's also great to hear from people from the younger generation writing in. A high schooler here. That's just a time, Jamie, that Phil and I were super into podcasts. We just mentioned, so we totally get what it's like to be a high schooler listening into podcasts. So thanks for writing in.
We're totally cool. Daniel's sitting with his chair flipped around right now.
Yeah, I've got
like
my
us.
baseball cap on backwards. No, actually, can I tell this story real quick?
Sure.
Is that Jamie? We're not gonna forget you. I think you'll find this funny. I told Phil this earlier. I recently got. I didn't tell this whole story. I got new shoes for work. I kind of found these like.
The orthopedics.
They're not like orthopedic. Like no.
Foam so that your ankles don't hurt.
Stop. Don't make fun of me. They are like casual shoes and like mesh, but they're kind of like dress shoes. But, it's a school, so I'm on my feet, but I'm also, my kids wear uniforms, so I can't like I need to dress professionally. Obviously, and I like to. I got my tie and stuff, but I want to wear shoes that are comfortable. So I finally went out and I found these kind of like half casual, half. I don't know what, dressy kind of shoes. Usually I just kind of wear these like plain like khakis, like not Sperry's, but they're like Bass. They're just like suede shoes. And I come with these shoes. They're a little bit, a little bit cooler, I guess, than what I'd wear. And my homeroom were sixth graders, and they went nuts. Like, like not like purposefully being mean to me. At least I hope not. Maybe they were. But just being like, we've never seen you wear cool shoes. You only wear dad shoes. Yep. And I was like, what? I have Nikes at home. Like, no, like you only wear dad shoes.
Yeah. I've been accused of wearing dad shoes, and they actually were my dad shoes.
I tease you. You regularly wear dress pants with tennis shoes.
Right.
Like, just like
not anymore, but for a while
pants.
I did. Yeah.
with like New Balance sneakers,
right,
and a tie and a shirt.
Yep.
I get, and thankfully your wife has fixed you of this ailment.
Turns out your shoes are under the table most of the time.
Oh my!
People look for a second, and I'm way more comfortable.
So the whole point of this story is Phil and I are most certainly not cool. So, but
okay, sentence number 2.
All right, let's get on to Jamie's sentence here. All right, so Jamie, she said she's writing in, because she hasn't heard a lot of people for her age writing in. She can say, I can say with very little embarrassment that I've done a happy dance in public every other Wednesday when I get an alert from podcasts that you guys have posted. Aslan is probably my favorite character because I've always found him as such a comforting figure in relation to Jesus. Aslan's best quotes, in my opinion, are "Courage, dear heart," and "Never doubt your value. Don't run from who you truly are." Have we? Is that from a?
You think it's from The Lion King?
No. Is that maybe from Horse and His Boy? Because I could be wrong. That doesn't sound familiar to me.
Not immediately familiar.
So I'm gonna keep reading. Yeah, you can do some research in the back. Jamie continues, I cannot pick a favorite book, so Prince Caspian, The Horse and His Boy, and Voyage of the Dawn Treader are all in my top 3. And then Silver Chair, The Last Battle, The Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, and The Magician's Nephew is the rest of my list, possibly because it is so different, talking about The Magician's Nephew. I love hearing your thoughts on the different elements in the books and how it relates to the Bible. I love to listen to your podcast at night, and I will tell you it is hard to relax when you guys have me trying to suppress laughter at 10 o'clock when my family is asleep. She must be my jokes, right?
Yeah, almost definitely.
Yeah, that's I think all of the jokes that I make on the show consist of me just being wrong about things and you correcting me. She goes on. She says, I subscribe to your Patreon, and by the way, thank you. She subscribed to our Patreon for Christmas and have not regretted it. Also, please keep going with your nerdy sidetracks. Those are my favorite. Side note, I just figured out 2 days ago that Liam Neeson is Qui-Gon Jinn as well as Aslan. Never noticed that before. Phil, before we go on, hot take. Which is a better role for Neeson, Qui-Gon Jinn or Aslan?
Qui-Gon Jinn.
It's not close, right? Like...
Yeah. It's such a good role.
And we've talked about him as Aslan. I think he does a good job. I think.
I think he's the best Aslan.
That's not that hard. There are some weaknesses to his portrayal, but I think with Qui-Gon Jinn, I really think he's probably one of the best parts of Phantom Menace, and he's in a role that I think people have really started to value over the last 20 years after the movies come out. Yes, despite some weaknesses in Phantom Menace, he is phenomenal in it, and he brings a really interesting dynamic to the Jedi as someone who's kind of like, pushing back against the authority of even the Council himself. So,
he doesn't, his character doesn't have a ton of money or resources, but he does have a particular set of skills, and I think the skills make him very dangerous to people like the Sith.
Oh wait, that's from Taken. I'm like looking at you. I'm like, I do not know what you were doing right now. I've never seen it, but I've seen the trailer, and I know enough. All right. So Jamie continues. She says, I've also remembered that you guys tried out... I'm also recommending, that you guys try out BBC Sherlock, if you haven't already. I know Phil is hesitant about watching TV shows, but Sherlock only has 13 episodes, and it has Bilbo and Smaug, so I'm hooked. One thing I would find interesting for y'all to address, especially Phil, is how you think the books will end and what characters you think will make an appearance. A second idea I have, maybe for your Patreon, is to take a which Narnia character are you quiz online, possibly with some other people as well, maybe Sarah Jane and Anna. We could definitely do that. That'd be fun. And I think that could be a really interesting episode. Thank you both so much for all your hard work and everything you put into the podcast. I might have mixed up both of your names without knowing faces, so sorry if I did. Well, I'll say this. I'm Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel is 6'5",
yes,
and
correct.
230 pounds of muscle.
Yes, I have.
Not really.
What do you mean, not really? You're implying that I'm the exact opposite of that.
I'm not saying you're the opposite of that.
No, we know what you're saying. All right. Actually, if I'll have you know, I have put on some dad pounds. So
some dad pounds.
Yeah,
must be a British thing. Is that like their allowance?
Yeah, it's a nice little pun. So she finishes the email to Narnia in the North from Jamie P.S. Now I'm really curious as to how Daniel used to say Wolf.
Oh man, I'm impressed you finished that correctly.
I slowed it down to say it right.
I'll tell you how I used to say it. I used to say it wolf. And there's 2.5 seasons of that. If you go back
I think we
enough.
fixed it by Caspian.
Okay.
I think we fixed it by Caspian. By we, I mean me, but sure. Well, Jamie, this was such a fun email. We've had lots of laughs going. Wait, that sounds like an insult, but like we've had lots of laughs going through it and discussing it. We got to get back though. Jamie brought up BBC's. Now I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. It's a guy named Benedict Cumberbund and Martin.
That's the thing that you wear with your tux, right?
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So. You've got wait, what now? I can't actually say his last name. It's Benedict. What is
Cumberbatch?
Cumberbatch. That's right. Yeah, and Martin Freeman in Sherlock. Have you watched the show?
I have. This was another funny thing where Daniel and I knew each other for years, and we didn't know that we had this shared interest in Sherlock. So we both have seen almost all the episodes of the show. You've seen everything. I think I have one or two that I haven't seen. Mm-hmm. I watched them kind of as they came out, but it was difficult because they're very long. So I think it's funny that Jamie says that there are only 13 episodes, but they're also each a movie.
They're movie, right? They're all 90 minutes. They're a movie.
Yeah, it does take an investment of time, but it's really good and it's very worth it.
It's.
I also started because it was free and I was able to get a really nice kind of free ebook version. I read one of the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Oh yeah, you told me that. Yeah.
And I really wanted to watch the show again, so Sarah Jane and I sat down and watched the.
Oh really?
Watched the show as soon as I finished the book, and it was really fun to see subtle little things that they changed, and it went from a study in pink to a study in scarlet, or reverse.
I think it was a Study in Scarlet is the original Doyle novel.
Yeah, and then A Study in Pink is...
Yeah, I mean, they do it for all. There's the second novel is The Sign of the Four, and I think the episode, that's the one where Watson gets married. I think that's the one where Watson gets married. Or maybe that's just where he made his wife Mary. I think that's just where he meet her. I can't remember if they actually get married in there or not. Spoiler alert for a book that came out over 100 years ago. It's obviously it's modern day. I really like the show. As someone who had actually read some of his works before, that was not my first introduction to the character.
Which I think is so interesting. Because how old were you when you were doing that? This was freshman year of college, right?
Yeah, but they're not hard books to read.
I feel like they're a little... It's less common for people to have read them.
Yeah. I mean, but I also was I was in the Center for Humanities in high school, so that was we were reading a ton of classics, Yeah. So I mean, and the Hound of Baskervilles is only 150 pages. It's really maybe it's not that short, but it's pretty short. And and I'd read that, and so I really do like Sherlock. I will say I'd love to know what Jamie thinks, or any of our listeners that they're fans of Sherlock. I found the first two series to be much, much stronger. And the third and fourth series to be significantly weaker, still enjoyable, especially because Freeman and Cumberbatch are so strong in their roles. They're both absolutely spectacular. But I do think the first two series are stronger. I don't know if they'll ever make any more. I think both the third and fourth series have ended in places where if they never return to it, it kind of could be the ending, but also it's open enough where, hey, you can always come back. Right. I also just have to say...
There's plenty of content.
Oh, yeah.
And in addition to the real Sherlock Holmes, there's also someone who published a bunch of stories about Sherlock Holmes, but to avoid copyright. This was back in the day. Doyle was still alive. He published them under Herlock Sholmes.
No, he did not.
He did. It's a real thing.
Oh, my gosh.
And somehow that was okay.
I've also got to mention Andrew Scott, who plays Moriarty on the show. He is absolutely phenomenal. Everything that guy is in is just gold for the except Spectre. That wasn't that great, but he is just such an incredible actor, and I think he's my favorite portrayal of that kind of evil psychotic genius in any kind of medium. He does such a great. In television, he does such a great job, and so I love when he's on that show. He does. He was great. I don't know if you've seen Fleabag. I don't know if I'd recommend. It's definitely it's got a lot of vulgarity to it, so I don't know if I'd recommend it per se. But he is phenomenal in it. It's Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who's just an absolute comedic genius. She's very, very talented. But it's not for the family. So I'll say that. But yeah, so Sherlock is great. Yeah, so Jamie, thanks for saying that. It does make me, Anna and I should go back and rewatch it. I have not seen any of it since the last series came out, whenever that was, 5 or 6 years ago. I haven't seen a single episode, so maybe we should go back and watch that, Anna and I. We'll go back and watch the first series, which I think we have never watched together. We both had just seen it before we met.
Yep.
So that was, 8 years ago? So it's been a while.
It has been a while.
But yeah, so Jamie, thanks for bringing that up. We will definitely talk about that. And I loved it, Jamie. If you want to let us know your thoughts on those other series of Sherlock, we'd love to hear that too. And I hope that you enjoy as we get into The Last Battle of Magician's Nephew, especially as books that are maybe not your favorite. I think we'll hopefully be able to bring some new things to make those books maybe a little bit more enjoyable. So thanks again for writing in, Jamie. This is awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
All right, Phil, you have the next email. You have an email from Holly Lawson. This email is entitled Witches and Narnia.
Holly writes, "Hello, Daniel and Phil." Oh, your name got to be first that time. It must be a fun thing.
Actually, all the ones I picked up today might have had my name. Jamie had my name first. Thank you, Jamie.
Oh, yeah. Heard it here first, folks. If you want
our next email, too, after this one also has my name first.
If you want Daniel to pick your email, that goes a long way, apparently. I'm just kidding.
Have we made that joke before? I don't remember.
We've talked about it on the show where it sounds better one way because the better names
it's Phil first. And Daniel does sound better. Yeah. But have we joked about me only picking ones where my name's first? I don't
think so. We need an archivist.
Well, the problem is that we don't record every time we hang out, obviously, and so sometimes I'm worried that maybe we made that joke and we weren't recording, and now we've said
There's only one solution.
I'm not listening to all that stuff.
Record
again.
Everything.
No. Oh, do you think that's it?
Yeah, just everything we do.
Yeah, this is the real world.
And then pay someone to transcribe it. So Holly writes, "Hello, Daniel and Phil. I was just re-listening to your latest episode on Chapter 12 of The Silver Chair, and the discussion on whether or not the White Witch and the Queen of the Underland are related or connected to one another piqued my interest. I've often wondered about the connection between these two, and the movies, old and new, have made things really confusing. According to Paul Ford and his companion to Narnia, the White Witch and the Queen of the Underland are connected, but they are not the same person. Making things even more confusing, he talks about how the hag and Prince Caspian remarks that witches can't really be killed. In conversation with Dr. Cornelius, the hag says, 'Sweet Master Doctor, learned Master Doctor, who ever heard of a witch that really died? You can always get them back.' I take this to mean that Aslan wasn't lying when he said the White Witch was dead. The person of the White Witch was dead, but the evil inside her lived on, and comes in other forms throughout the books. Ford seemed to agree with this understanding. He says that the White Witch and the Queen of the Underland are of the same kind. He says that they're both part of the same group of evil witches, partly evidenced by the fact that they both intended to rule Narnia and both practiced sweet deductions. There's more we could dive into about these two, but it would cause heavy spoilers. Suffice it to say that evil has been present from the beginning of Narnia and will be present all the way until the end."
All right, can we pause and discuss this now? Because there's a little thing that Holly brings up next, but I think we should talk about this. When we got this email, and again, this is the first time we're recording since after finishing the season, which was actually a while ago, and a lot of times the emails catch up with us after we've already recorded. We've had this conversation a lot, and I don't get tired of having it just because there is so much confusion surrounding it. And I love what Holly has done by bringing our attention to both Paul Ford and through him to what Dr. Cornelius says here about the sweet, or the hag says, who's ever heard of a witch that really died. I love what Holly uses in her logic here, which is that Aslan can't be lying. She doesn't think he is. I don't think we don't even know if he could lie, right? He says that the witch is dead. So we need to believe him and say the witch is dead. So let's use some kind of professor logic from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, right? So logically, if she is dead, she's not alive. So whatever we're seeing in some way, shape, or form can be some of this evil, right? But cannot be herself, right? So I think all of this continues to solidify for us the fact that the White Witch and the Queen of the Underland might have some kind of connection. There might even be some kind of relation potentially, but it is just fundamentally not the same person. Are you still on board with this?
I'm on board.
Okay. But I did totally. I'm glad you brought this up because I totally just had forgotten about that Prince Caspian thing there. Man, what a great chapter! I love sorcery and sudden vengeance. Yeah, ugh, such a fun one. All right, what? Keep going.
She also says, "Here's a map I came across for the silver chair."
And this map here is one I've seen. I'll post it down there, listeners. You can look right now. Unless you're driving, don't do that. Don't look now. But if you're not operating a motor vehicle, this picture that you're able to look at is not necessarily a map of Narnia in the traditional sense. Instead, it shows us from the marshes across the Ettinsmoor, across that giant's bridge, right, all the way to the ruined city and then Harfang. From there, it actually goes down, and we can see into the deep realm, past Father Time, to those pale beaches, to the sunless sea, all the way to the dark castle, and then the drop off to Bism. I had looked at this map when we first started recording this season, almost a year ago at this point, and then totally forgot about it until now. I'm so glad that Holly has brought this to our attention and just reminded us. And she's got two things she wanted to draw our attention to. What were they, Phil?
She says, "I'm sure you guys already have access to this, but I wanted to draw attention to two things. Bism is directly under Narnia, and two, Bism is much deeper underground than the Underland, making Underland seem like a counterfeit kingdom that is trying to take the place of the real thing, which is Bism." Ooh. It's an excellent point. Can't wait to finish out this book with you guys. Thank you for the podcast, Holly. So this is a great image. I just like looking at this. What were you going to say?
Well, this second thing that Holly brought up here, it hit me. Just how great of a connection this is. So well done, Holly. This is really something special. The Underland, thinking of it as this kind of counterfeit to the real underworld. When we look here, you see Bism is impressively further down, unbelievably deeper than the underworld that we saw with the sunless sea, the shallow lands, and the dark castle in the city. And let's think about even this from a biblical perspective. How often we can, as Christians, we can make idols out of things that are really shallow imitations of the real thing. Think about Lewis in The Weight of Glory when he talks about people making mud pies in the slums because they can't imagine a holiday at the sea. Like we're just, we're not seeing really how great things could be. Being underground is not inherently a bad thing at all. In this story, Bism is supposedly a pretty good place from what Gulg tells us. But the Dark Castle is just a fake imitation of that. I think that's such a deep thing to think of.
Yeah, I'm just mesmerized by this picture. I'm glad this is brought to our attention.
Phil just likes the picture. Yeah, you only get the one picture per chapter for yours. Well, Holly, thanks so much for sharing this email with us.
Thanks
this
for
is
writing us.
Really great thing, and thanks for that last little note about the counterfeit kingdom. I really appreciate that. And I'm gonna keep thinking about that. All right. Well, our final email is an email from Richard, and he begins the email with hello. He very wisely does not pick a Phil or Daniel or Phil side by not addressing either of us. Very wise decision. I'm going to go ahead and assume that because...
that's the problem with not choosing a side.
By not choosing...
You're going to assume that he was going to say yours first.
Alphabetically, my name comes first. So I'm going to read this as hello, Daniel Phil.
As someone whose last name starts with a W, I hate the alphabetical argument.
You have to eventually tell me what your last name is. I don't know. We stopped that charade, didn't we? It's okay. Hello, Daniel and Phil. By the way, this is for chapter 12 specifically. He's thinking about the Queen of the Underland, that really climactic chapter that we had in the Silver Chair. So he's listening to this chapter. I'm listening to the audiobook chapter by chapter before your podcast. He says, I found something very important to me in it that I don't think occurred to me before. The whole scene with the lady enchanting and questioning them is one of the most violent scenes in the entire series to me. It is most definitely gaslighting, making the victim feel like they are the ones hurting someone else, and trying to make them accept that anything she were to do, speaking of the Lady of the Green Kirtle, to them they cannot and should not complain about. But the thing that really stood out to me was Puddleglum's statement. I'm on the side of Aslan, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live in Narnia as a Narnian as I can, even if there isn't any Narnia. I'd never heard that as a variation of Pascal's wager, which you rejected too, but as a feeling that even if Aslan and the nation of Narnia didn't exist, the code of honor and behavior that those things imply are worth living by. This is the bit that really means something to me. Now, before going to this next part, just as a aside, I always love when our listeners outside of the United States write honor and behavior with a U. I really wish we did that in America. It just looks way better.
It adds a nice color
to the writing. All right. Well, Richard continues, though. He shares something really special with us. He says, I was raised in the Church of England, but I've never been able to convince myself or to be convinced that the events I was taught and continue to read about are absolutely true, even while I see they are worth living by. I consider myself an agnostic, which to me is not what some people seem to judge as an atheist with commitment issues. Richard said it, not me. I spent time at a Christian union while I was at university, and I'm now following along with your podcast and the Pints with Jack podcast, and I'm finding an awful lot in the writings of Lewis that I really like and really make me think. And Puddleglum's declaration really makes me want to live as a Christian, even if I am unsure whether the Christ written about in the New Testament is true history, and it makes me feel like at least some Christians can see that as a valid path, while others I have met have made it very clear that they think I am damned just for being unsure. I'm not sure where to go from here, apart from continuing to follow along with your podcasts. Living under stay-at-home orders leaves me with few options right now. Narnia has always been important to me. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was one of the first books I remember choosing for myself. I found it in the small church library in the parish I grew up in and have been a fan ever since. I'm enjoying your talks and finally managed to get hold of the focus on the family productions in time to follow along with the Dancing Lawn podcast. They were quite tricky to get I can't imagine. Because that's just an American company, isn't it? He's not writing this. This is me asking Phil, just for listeners. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, how tricky that would be for people. We're covering those over on the Dancing Lawn.
And I doubt they ran into this, but different countries get different versions of stuff as well. Don't.
Really?
Yeah. Well, in terms of, I don't think it happened for this.
Oh, okay.
But in terms of movies, sometimes they change stuff. Different books change things.
Interesting. Yeah. So he said, they were a little tricky to get a hold of in the UK, and as the BBC's in-house radio production is much more common, I've listened to that one many times. Here is the funny thing, I will say, Richard, is that I want to listen to the BBC audio, and I can find it like on YouTube, but I wanted to get on Audible so I could listen to it, as an audiobook, and I can't get it. Here in America, we can't get the BBC one. Yeah, it's like blacked out.
Sounds like we need to take a road trip or a boat trip.
Oh, yeah, we're not going to last very long if we take a road trip to the UK. He said, lastly, I agree the green mist from the Voyage of the Dawn Treader was planned to be related to the Silver Chair adaptation that had gone ahead. As soon as I saw it, I imagined the same mist was going to come from the fire in the screen version of this scene. Oh, I love that, right? The idea that would be there. Yeah. That might have actually worked then. I don't know. I don't know if it worked, but like
doesn't make up for what they did.
I would not have hated the green mist as much that it happened. All right, Richard continues. He said, it has been more than 10 years since I watched the BBC TV Silverchair, and I can't remember how they did it in that version. I look forward to watching it once I finish the book with you soon. So we've obviously now finished the book, and we are going to go cover that very soon. We have not. You and I haven't watched it yet. We're going to soon. Richard finishes the podcast. He finishes the email saying, thank you for starting and continuing with such a wonderful podcast. I know you have plans for when you're done with the series, but I would love you to continue with the Space Trilogy. I have those books on my shelf, but I've never read them yet, and it would be good to read them for the first time along with you. Best wishes in this difficult time and for the future, Richard.
Well, thanks, Richard. That's so fun to get an email about that, and some great ideas in here, too.
Well, Richard, thank you so much, especially just for being willing to share with us even just where you've been spiritually. And we're really happy. We're really glad to hear that, you've been able to listen to Matt and David and Andrew over at Pints with Jack, and then us here and what we're doing on the Lamppost Listener. And we're just, what we'll say is we'll just be praying for you. And for any other listeners, too, that may be in a similar place as Richard, we're always excited to talk about these things or even point you in the direction of the resources. If you're reading some things that you're like, oh, wow, these are really speaking to me in ways I've maybe never thought of before. We're always happy to point you in the direction of a book or another podcast with people a lot smarter than we are. So please, you're not going to offend us. If you're like, hey, who are some people that know more than y'all do? We'll let you know.
Yeah, it's a long list.
It's a very, very long list. So there's a lot of stuff we can send you. So, Richard, thank you for sharing that. We really do appreciate it.
Definitely.
And thank you for this wonderful, wonderful email.
I also love the idea for the space trilogy. Daniel gave me the first book, and I've been reading that, and pretty good.
Yeah, I mean,
it's very different.
We're not going to really say much about what happens after this last battle here. Phil and I absolutely love doing the podcast, but it also is it's not easy to get these things out on time, especially with things good. I'm also starting grad school on top of everything else. I haven't even mentioned that. So life is quite busy, but it is important for us to make time for this, even just because Phil and I like hanging out. So, we're not exactly sure what things will hold, but there are Google Docs with plans, and there might be some books that we've had requested on there. There might not be. I'm not going to say anything else. But I like the Space Trilogy too. Well, Phil, any other final thoughts before we move on here?
Just reading those three, and, we read the other emails as well. Just we pick some for the show. I'm, again, so grateful for the people who reach out and take the time to write us stuff. And the writing is well thought out and communicates clearly, and I know that takes time. I'm just grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, and keep them coming, listeners. We'll have we'd love to have quite a bit of emails to be able to read when we begin The Horse and His Boy. So even during the hiatus, feel free to reach out to us. We might not, like I said, I get the emails on my phone. I don't always read them right when they show up, but I can see them right there. And so it really just, it's funny. Sometimes I'll respond to somebody on Twitter, or you'll get an email. We'll respond to somebody an email and say, oh, it made my day, which is, it's always funny to hear that. But to us, it literally makes my day when I hear from y'all. When I get an email, it really makes my day when I hear from a listener. So we always appreciate those and keep them coming. Well, Phil, I think that brings our time together to an end. And that means that we've got, do we want to say it all what's coming up next, or should we just kind of leave some more hiatus episodes shrouded in mystery?
Let's shroud them in mystery, but there will be more on the way.
There are more. We've got some fun things planned. We can say that over on the Dancing Lawn in March, in February actually, I don't think I mentioned this. I released a lecture that I gave. That was our episode, was one of the lectures I gave for my class. It's about
from the great courses.
From the great. I released the lecture I gave on Lewis and the creation of the Chronicles of Narnia. So if you do want to know more, that could be a great place. I did quite a bit of research on that. In order to share that for the class I was teaching. We'll release some more of those down the road. I've said, before they will save us when we don't have time to record. We will use one of those for the Dancing Lawns, and I'm sure that'll happen again soon. But we're continuing. We're in Prince Caspian. We're still talking about Prince Caspian, and then we've got the Dawn Treader BBC version, the 3-hour Dawn Treader BBC
3-hour tour.
3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour. Do you know there's only like 80 episodes of that show?
There's only 80?
Isn't that? There's like so many classic television shows like that you're like...
It's not even enough for syndication.
It's not. You're like, oh, that show must have been on for 50 years. And you're like, oh, it was on for 3 years for 80 episodes. I guess just when you only have 3 channels, the same shows get played over and over again on reruns. Yeah. I do wonder if syndication might have been lower than 100 episodes back then.
I would think so, just because of the number of places I remember seeing that show. But.
I need to confess something, Phil. I was wrong. It was 98 episodes. 98 episodes.
Just so close.
This is so wild about TV back then. First season, 36 episodes.
Wow. This is a different time.
That's so much TV. Oh, this is nice. We're bookending this episode talking about television. So I think that is a great place for us to end. So we'll be back next time with something special. We'll be back soon. Is that how we want to leave it?
Sounds good to me.
Do we have a better way to end it? We should probably end with our regular little thing here. You want to do the music? Why don't you do our end credits, okay?
This episode is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you too can listen to a bonus episode each month, along with other rewards. Special thanks goes to Elias Dean, Hannah Anderson, John Marr, Emily Margaret, and Ryan Smith for supporting us at our top tiers. You can follow us into Narnia on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Email us at thenarniapodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 406-646-6733. A review on Apple Podcasts would also be appreciated. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we will be back soon.